He was a boy who had it all: the most powerful empire on earth, the devotion of his legions, and a future that seemed boundless. He was Emperor Gordian III, a teenager dropped into the throne of Rome during its most violent and chaotic century. But he made one fatal mistake. He trusted the wrong man. This is the story of how a boy emperor, beloved by his people, lost everything to a man who started as his subordinate and ended as his master. It's a story of ambition, betrayal, and the brutal realities of power that dragged the Roman world into even deeper chaos. Have you ever wondered what it's like to inherit the world, only to have it snatched away by the very person you chose to protect you? This isn't just a story about politics. It's a timeless lesson in how fragile power can be and how poisonous unchecked ambition is. This is the story of an emperor brought down by a man whose humble origins fueled a relentless drive to shatter the chains of his station and seize the ultimate prize. The Roman Empire in the 3rd century was a wounded beast, lashing out in a frenzy of civil war, assassination, and rebellion. This era, now known as the crisis of the 3rd century, was a meat grinder for emperors. To rule Rome was to have a target painted on your back. Life expectancy was short, and death was almost always violent. And into this storm, in the single, blood-soaked year of 238 AD, a year that saw no fewer than 6 different men claim the throne, a boy was chosen to be the symbol of Rome's salvation. His name was Marcus Antonius Gordianus, and he was only 13 years old. To get the tragedy of Gordian III, you first have to understand the world that made him. The year 238 AD kicked off under the iron fist of Maximinus Thrax, a giant of a man, a battle-hardened soldier of common birth who'd taken power by murdering his predecessor. Thrax was a blunt instrument, effective on the battlefield but hated by the Roman Senate, who saw him as a low-born barbarian unfit to wear the imperial purple. Their hatred simmered until, far away in the province of Africa, a rebellion finally boiled over. The landowners there, crushed by Thrax's taxes, proclaimed their elderly governor, Gordian, as the new emperor. This was Gordian I. At 80 years old, he accepted reluctantly, insisting that his son, Gordian II, rule beside him as his equal. The Senate, jumping at the chance to get rid of Thrax, eagerly backed the two Gordians. For a moment, it seemed a new, more respectable dynasty had arrived, but their reign lasted just 22 days. The governor of a neighboring province, loyal to Maximinus Thrax, marched on Carthage. Gordian II was killed leading a makeshift army. When the old Gordian I heard the news of his son's death, he took his own life in grief. Rome spiraled into panic. The Senate had openly defied Maximinus, and now their chosen champions were dead. With Thrax and his legions marching on Italy, the senators, in a desperate act of self-preservation, elected 2 of their own, Pupienus and Balbinus, as co-emperors. But the people of Rome, who had adored the Gordian family, started to riot. They didn't trust these 2 stern senators. To calm the mob, a deal was struck. The grandson of Gordian I and nephew of the fallen Gordian II was brought out. This was our Gordian, and the people demanded he be given a place in the new government. He was named Caesar, heir apparent to the 2 new emperors. The stage was now set for a bloody finale to the year of the 6 emperors. Maximinus Thrax was murdered by his own fed-up troops while stuck besieging a city. Pupienus and Balbinus returned to Rome as heroes, but their victory was short-lived. They were old rivals who couldn't stand each other, constantly bickering and watching their backs. Their paranoia created a power vacuum that the Praetorian Guard, the emperor's elite bodyguards, were happy to fill. Less than 100 days after the 2 senator emperors took power, the Praetorians stormed the palace, seized them, stripped them, tortured them, and butchered them in the streets. And in the silence that followed, only one claimant was left. The Praetorian Guard lifted the 13-year-old boy, Gordian III, onto their shields and proclaimed him the sole Augustus, the master of the Roman world. On July 29, 238 AD, the whirlwind of chaos finally stopped spinning, leaving a child on the most dangerous throne on earth. For young Gordian, the imperial palace was a golden cage. He was emperor, but he wasn't the ruler. Real power was in the hands of the aristocratic families of the Senate, who saw him as a puppet they could control. He was surrounded by luxury, but also by whispers and shadows. Every smiling courtier, every bowing senator, was a potential threat. In this world of deadly politics, a boy emperor couldn't survive alone. He needed a protector, an advisor, someone he could trust with his life. And for a while, it looked like he'd found that man. In 241 AD, a decision was made that would change everything for Gordian's reign. The young emperor, now about 16, appointed a new Praetorian prefect. This wasn't just the commander of the imperial guard. The prefect was the emperor's right-hand man, chief of staff, and often the second most powerful person in the empire. The man chosen for this job was Gaius Furius Sabinius Aquila Timesitheus. By all accounts, Timesitheus was a man of incredible talent. He wasn't a born aristocrat. He was from the equestrian order, the class just below the senators, known for producing the empire's best administrators and officers. He had worked his way up the ladder through sheer skill and hard work, serving as a financial expert in provinces from Arabia to Gaul. He was a master of logistics and finance, the boring but essential stuff that holds an empire together. He was exactly the kind of experienced, steady hand the government needed. Timesitheus quickly became the real power behind the throne. But he was more than an advisor. He became family. In a brilliant political move, Timesitheus had Gordian marry his daughter, Furia Sabinia Tranquillina. This union made the prefect the emperor's father-in-law, tying their fates together. Unlike so many others, Timesitheus showed no desire for the throne itself. He seemed happy to be the loyal mentor to the young emperor he now called son. But their greatest test was coming. Beyond the Euphrates River, a new and dangerous enemy had risen, the Sasanian Empire of Persia. Their king, Shapur I, was a brilliant warrior eager to challenge Rome's might. Shapur invaded the Roman province of Mesopotamia, capturing key cities. It was a direct challenge Rome couldn't ignore. Timesitheus, the master administrator, proved he was also a master strategist. In 242 AD, he organized a massive military campaign, and the following spring, the Roman army marched out with Emperor Gordian III and his father-in-law Timesitheus at its head. The campaign started as a stunning success. The Roman legions, led by Timesitheus, swept across Mesopotamia. At the Battle of Razina in 243 AD, they crushed Shapur's army and forced him to retreat, taking back the lost cities. It was a huge triumph. The boy emperor was a victorious commander, at least in name. It looked like a history-making victory was within their grasp. But as the army settled in for the winter, preparing for the final push, a new figure began to rise through the ranks. And then, disaster struck. Timesitheus, the architect of their victory and protector of the emperor, suddenly died. The official story was that he died of an illness, a common fate for soldiers on campaign. But dark rumors spread through the camp. One Roman source, the Historia Augusta, claims it was no accident, alleging he was murdered. And the man who stood to gain the most was his deputy, the man who would replace him as Praetorian prefect, Marcus Julius Philippus, a man history would come to know as Philip the Arab. So who was this Philip the Arab? To the elites in Rome, he was a nobody. Born around 204 AD in a small town in Roman Syria, he was the son of a local Roman citizen of some importance, but a world away from the gilded halls of power. To the proud Roman aristocracy, a man from a dusty corner of Syria was little better than a barbarian. In a world where your family name was everything, Philip was an outsider whose ambition was bigger than his pedigree. Philip's rise came through the military, a path open to men with talent and grit. His big break likely came through his brother, Priscus, who was already an important official. It was probably his brother who helped get Philip the job as deputy to the great Timesitheus. He was in the right place at the right time. When Timesitheus died, a power vacuum ripped open at the heart of the campaign. Gordian III, now 19, was suddenly alone, deprived of his mentor and father-in-law. This was Philip's moment. He was appointed the new Praetorian prefect, inheriting the immense power of his predecessor. He was now in command of the legions, the ultimate source of power in the Roman world. And here, the story takes a dark turn. According to some ancient historians, the character of the war immediately changed. The army was deep in enemy territory, hundreds of miles from its main supply bases. An army marches on its stomach, and any disruption could mean disaster. The ancient historian Zosimus paints a damning picture, claiming Philip deliberately sabotaged the army's supply chain. According to this account, he had grain ships diverted and moved troops to areas where there were no provisions. Slowly, hunger began to spread through the Roman camps. The victorious legions now had empty stomachs, and their morale collapsed. The soldiers, simple men far from home, didn't understand the complex logistics. They just knew they were hungry. They began to grumble, their loyalty to the young emperor fading. Philip, the man in charge of their supplies, now allegedly fanned the flames of discontent. He supposedly told the troops that Gordian was too young and inexperienced to lead them, that his youth was the reason for their suffering. It was a masterful and vicious psychological campaign. He presented himself not as the cause of the problem, but as the solution, an experienced soldier who understood their needs. One of them, unlike the distant boy in the imperial tent. He was exploiting the most powerful force in Roman politics, the resentment of the common soldier against the privileged elite. Gordian III, who had trusted Philip as his father-in-law's replacement, was now becoming his prisoner. He was isolated, surrounded by an army whose loyalty was being systematically stolen by the very man he had appointed to lead it. The golden hope of the Persian campaign was rapidly turning to ash. The boy emperor, victorious against a foreign king, was about to face a far more dangerous enemy inside his own camp. According to the accounts that tell this story, Philip staged a final, public confrontation. He addressed the legions, laying the blame for the famine squarely on Gordian, portraying him as an incompetent kid leading them all to ruin. He then gave them a choice: keep following a boy who couldn't feed them, or turn to a real soldier who had the strength to lead them. For the desperate soldiers, the choice was simple. They chose Philip, hailing him as their new emperor. The betrayal was complete. In the middle of a war, the Roman army had mutinied, deposing their emperor for his second-in-command. For Gordian III, it was the end of everything. His power vanished in an instant. The guards who had sworn to protect him now answered to Philip. According to some sources, the 19-year-old emperor begged for his life. He offered to give up his title, to serve as Philip's subordinate, anything to be spared. But for Philip, a living Gordian would always be a threat. The boy was from a family beloved by the people and respected by the Senate. As long as he was alive, he was a symbol of legitimacy, a potential rallying point for any rival. Philip, the usurper, couldn't afford that. The plea was rejected. The final moments of Gordian III's life are a mystery. The Persian version, inscribed by King Shapur I on a monument, claims the two armies fought a great battle where the Romans were defeated and Gordian III was killed in action. This, of course, was Shapur's propaganda. Roman sources are more conflicted, as if trying to hide the shame. Some suggest Gordian died in battle after being weakened by Philip's schemes. Another claims he just fell off his horse. But the most persistent Roman account is that on February 11th, 244 AD, near a place called Zatha on the Euphrates River, Gordian III was murdered by his own soldiers, on the orders of the man who stole his throne. Philip, ever the politician, knew he couldn't look like a king killer. He sent a letter to the Senate in Rome with the tragic news: The beloved young emperor had died of a sudden illness. It was a convenient lie the Senate had little choice but to accept. Philip the Arab, the man from the fringes of the empire, was now the undisputed emperor of Rome. His betrayal had paid off. He had risen from obscurity to the pinnacle of power, standing on the body of the boy who had trusted him. The death of Gordian III marked a grim end to a life that had started with so much promise. He was just 19. His reign of nearly 6 years, while mostly managed by others, had been a rare moment of stability. The people of Rome had genuinely loved him. Now he was just another victim of the empire's brutal politics. Philip's first act as emperor was to end the war. The glorious campaign planned by Timesitheus was over. Philip needed to get back to Rome to secure his power, not waste time fighting in the east. He quickly negotiated a peace treaty with Shapur. The terms were humiliating. Philip agreed to pay the Persians a massive sum of money and gave up Roman influence in Armenia. It was a peace bought with gold, a far cry from the triumph Timesitheus had envisioned. Roman historians called the treaty shameful, but it served Philip's purpose. In a final act of stunning cynicism, Philip went to great lengths to honor the man he'd betrayed. He had a grand memorial tomb built for Gordian where he had died. He then had Gordian's ashes sent back to Rome for a state burial. Once he was securely in power, Philip had the Senate formally deify Gordian III, officially making the murdered boy a god. It was a masterstroke of PR. By deifying his predecessor, Philip calmed the people and the Senate, erasing the stain of his treason and styling himself as a loyal successor, not a murderer. He who killed the emperor now publicly worshipped him as a god. The legacy of Gordian III is a tragic one. He was an emperor who reigned but never ruled. His time in power was defined by the men who guided him. First, the wise and loyal Timesitheus, who brought victory, and then the ambitious Philip, who brought betrayal and death. He is remembered not for what he did, but for what was done to him. His death marked the final victory of the barracks over the Senate. From now on, the path to the throne wouldn't be paved with noble blood, but with military might and pure ruthlessness. With Gordian III dead and deified, Philip the Arab was free to build his own legacy. He returned to Rome and worked to establish himself as a legitimate ruler. He stayed on good terms with the Senate, knowing that while the army gave him the throne, he needed the aristocracy to keep it. He also moved quickly to start his own dynasty. He elevated his young son, also named Philip, to the rank of Caesar and heir. He even had his father, Julius Marinus, a respected local figure of equestrian rank in Syria, posthumously deified. The man from the fringes of the empire was now inventing a divine heritage for his family. He poured money into his hometown, renaming it Philippopolis, the city of Philip. Philip's 5-year reign was surprisingly stable for the turbulent 3rd century. He was a capable administrator and won several victories on the Danube frontier. But his most memorable act was drenched in irony. In April of 248 AD, this emperor from Arabia, an outsider who had seized power through betrayal, presided over the biggest party in Roman history, the Secular Games, celebrating the 1000th anniversary of Rome's founding. The city erupted in magnificent festivities and bloody games in the Colosseum, a grand spectacle designed to celebrate 1,000 years of Roman glory, all hosted by an emperor who embodied the very forces that were tearing that world apart. Later Christian historians claimed Philip was Rome's first Christian emperor, though this is a claim most modern scholars reject, as there is no solid evidence. If true, it would add another layer of irony, the first Christian emperor being the one who so ruthlessly embodied the unchristian values of betrayal and murder. But Philip's own ambition eventually came for him. His reign ended the same way it began. In 249 AD, the legions on the Danube proclaimed their own general, Decius, as emperor. Decius marched on Italy, and near Verona, Philip the Arab was defeated and killed. His young son was murdered in Rome shortly after. The outsider who clawed his way to the top was, in the end, just another casualty of the crisis. The story of Gordian III and Philip the Arab is more than just a dramatic chapter from a declining empire. It's a powerful story about power itself, about how youthful trust is no match for ruthless ambition, and how the rules of the old world can be broken by new men from the outside who play by a different, more brutal set of rules. Gordian III was the boy who inherited an empire but never learned the vicious lessons needed to keep it. Philip the Arab was the man who started with nothing but a hunger for power, and he broke every chain to seize the throne, only to prove that in 3rd century Rome, no one stays on top for long. The wheel of fortune, which he had spun so violently, just kept on turning. The tragic tale of Gordian III is a stark reminder of the brutal game of power that hid beneath the marble and gold of imperial Rome. A boy emperor, set on the throne as a symbol of hope, was consumed by the very system he was supposed to lead. He was betrayed not by a foreign king, but by a man he trusted, a subordinate whose ambition was deadlier than any spear. So what do you think? In the game for the ultimate prize, what matters more, legitimacy or ruthlessness? Gordian had the title and the love of the people. Philip had the cunning and the will to do whatever it took. In the violent chaos of the 3rd century, we saw which one won. What are your thoughts on Philip's actions? Was he a monster, or just a product of his chaotic times, playing the game by the only rules that mattered? Let us know down in the comments. If you found this journey into the dark heart of Roman politics as fascinating as we do, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories from history. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss what's next. Thanks for watching.